So, welcome to the first edition of Nahar Jito Bookathon presented in association with Raisoni Foundation.
Thank
In
you.
this session, we'll explore the book Shift Decision for a Net Zero World by Professor Utkarsh Majmudar. The perpetually growing economy with which our financial system rests has now come into conflict with a finite biosphere. This moment in time needs reflection and action at a great speed. Economic opportunity, well-being of society, environmental and technological balance need a fresh, new looking. The shift starts with ensuring development without carbon emissions, product that can be reused and recycled, job that can be green, and an economy that is inclusive. The shift requires a collaborative process, breaking down the blocks of the past and visualizing the future in a completely different way. This book focuses on transition that companies need to make towards net zero circular economy without leaving anyone behind. It also focuses on the importance of environmental social governance norms and how they can be integrated into corporate strategies. If done right, the of modern world can define boundaries of the corporation and it's very solid. We are very much pleased to have Professor Utkarsh Majmudar for the discussions, and Professor Majmudar is a professional with over 2 decades of experience encompassing in the teaching, research and administration at the premier business schools in India, such as IIM Bangalore, IIM Lucknow, IIM Jaipur, to name a few, and working with a large organization in India like GE Capital's, iGET and HSBC. He teaches finance in the leading management institution, and he's also a member of Board of Honor in IIM Raipur. Apart from finance, he has done significant work in the area of sustainability, conducting annual studies of the performances of companies on corporate responsibility, working with large companies, publishing cases on sustainability, writing extensively on theme. He has co-authored 2 books, and his second book, Shift Decisions for a Net Zero World, has been released recently. And exactly that is going to be the point of discussion with our esteemed guest today in this particular session. So I once again welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much.
I have plenty of questions when I went through the work, what you have done. And the very first question that I begin with, you come from very field and you've been teaching in most of the leading institutions. You are guiding and consulting with lots of, extending your consultation to lots of the companies in private sector as well. The first thing is, what exactly inspired you to start thinking in terms of sustainability? And you started writing into this particular zone. So would you like to throw some light on that?
Okay, it's an interesting story. The co-author of my book, Namrata Rana, reached out to me once, and she was doing some work on sustainability, and she approached me and asked me if I was interested in doing some work along with her. And I've known her for about 30 years. We've been good friends, and I couldn't say no. And I said, let's. I mean, it's a different area. Let's take a shot at it and see how it goes.
Right, sir.
And somehow, over a period of time, my interest grew in the subject. And to such an extent that we kept collaborating on one project after the other. We've done extensive work together, right? So of course we've done work together, we've done work separately. So that's so it's both sides of the story. But the fact is that I sort of got drawn into this. I also realized in some way that finance and sustainability, ESG, are quite interlinked. And as we go along during the discussion, I will throw some light on how they are linked. But But I think having a background in finance helped me immensely because there's a significant linkage in terms of how uh, how sustainability works and how financing works.
Okay, that's fantastic, in fact, because that was obviously the question I had in my mind when I went through the entire thing. Sir, when we talk about the very book and when we talk about the shift, I just had a question like, is it an organizational responsibility or individuals are also expected to play a role in it?
Uh, so the question is it only organization's responsibility or individuals are also
Like individuals like us, not directly having any concern with. So,
no, no, it's both. It's both. See, organizations. So, so at a broad level, an organization will set its vision, mission, and strategy.
correct.
In order to implement that, or in order to implement the company's strategy, it's the people who have to do it. And the way I see it is that individuals at all levels in the company really need to be uh, both sensitized and energized to
Correct.
sort of bring about a change. So, and
Correct.
as you talked about shift, we are actually
Correct.
looking at shift when we are trying to look at the mindset, look at the ways of working. Uh, so, in terms of movement from uh, the way we are to the way we should be, I think there is a significant role of people and
Correct.
and people at all levels, not just senior management. Mostly people
Right.
think that if the senior management we will set the goals and targets and then people will follow. But unless
Correct.
people are really sensitized, it becomes very difficult for people to follow because they don't understand why they are doing it. And
Very true. Very true.
it's very important for people to understand why they are doing something, not just because it's an order from the top.
Correct. And sir, when it comes to the organizations, I'm sure that there are two ways to do it. One is there are stringent norms, defined where they are supposed to follow those norms, and there are some motivational ways of getting it done through them. So, just for my understanding's sake, like how this entire thing, when it comes to sustainability, is being implemented across. Is it a motivational approach, or is it something where we are having some very strong, stringent norms being uh, raised, made?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. So if you look at it, so how does it's also linked to how do societies evolve, right?
Correct.
We evolve with norms, right? We have
Right.
some kind of norms that we work with.
Correct.
Along the passage of time, norms get evolved into laws, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, so these norms, so you should not kill anyone, would have been a norm at one point in time. It got
Very true.
codified and became a law that you should
No.
not kill anyone.
Very true.
Similarly, if you look at environmental issues, uh, it I mean, it was fine that you should not pollute, but along the way, regulations came in, and it became sort of a requirement for companies not to
Correct.
pollute. Yeah, so
Correct.
there's this Environmental Pollution Act, etc. Uh, so, so the society, the way society moves, uh, uh, sort of businesses also move. Now, uh, once you have moved to legal, from legal you have to now one part is the requirement of a legal this thing. So you just
Sure.
meet the legal requirement, and then you are done. But more important is what you should really be doing it. Yeah.
Correct.
Should you be only sticking to law or should you go beyond the law? The trouble here is that in case of environmental and sustainable actions, laws aren't enough. And laws are usually behind times.
Correct.
So there is a need for organizations to move beyond the legal requirements to things from their own motivation. Like
Okay.
if you look at societies, and I'll again come back to societies, if you look at societies, or if you look at any religion, and let me pick it up from there. If you look at any religion in the world, right, every religion says, do no harm to others. Sustainability is about not doing harm to others. So it's intrinsically linked. So the way we as individuals have evolved and our thinking and beliefs are there, we need to do more. Yeah. So sustainable actions, ESG, net zero, they all also follow from there. So there are multiple things that are involved here. One thing is you do it because internally you feel like doing it. Alternatively, you do it because your competitor is doing it, and if you don't do it, you look bad, right? Uh, or the industry itself is moving in such a way that if you don't move along with the industry, then you'll be left behind. So it's not just norms and laws as you were talking about, but it is something which extends well beyond laws and regulations, something that you really need to do.
Sir, if I may say, like, when you explained it in this particular way, it was a very beautiful way to make me understand that thing. I personally feel that maybe a sustainability would be a value system for the organization in the future course. Like, it will be a value system. As important as honesty or integrity for an individual, maybe sustainability is something which can be rated as a value. What value system one believes in.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. It has to be. But then, see, individuals differ, right? Some individuals are very moral. Some individuals are extremely immoral. And then there is a continuum in between. So morality, immorality, right?
Absolutely.
So similarly, you have on sustainability, there are people, CEOs who are very evolved and focus significantly on environment. There are CEOs who are not evolved and who feel that environment is not important, so they don't do anything. And then in between, you have a whole range. So from people who are significantly environmental oriented to people who are relatively less environment in this thing. So it's a continuum, and you'll find people and organizations. Where people have different levels of interests in sustainability related issues.
Correct. And that's the reason why we see a spectrum of things. Like whenever we see things happening, we read in newspapers. So there are companies those are quite sensitive towards it, and there are companies where they are not greatly sensitive towards it.
Absolutely.
So these are the initial curiosities I had as an individual. I thought, let me ask so that our viewers will get benefited into. Now let me come to the title of the book as such. And there is a mention of concept of net zero world. So can you please help us, understand what is the concept of net zero world and why is it so crucial for companies?
Okay. So the concept of net zero is absolutely straightforward. But before we get into net zero, let me explain why some elements around it. Right. One thing is that industries pollute. That is something that we know, right? Human beings also pollute, but we do it at a much lesser level. So industries pollute, right? What they pollute are known as greenhouse gases, yeah, which is a combination of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxide, and several other gases that are involved.
Correct.
Right? So, but we look at carbon as the main gas, and then convert all other gases that are emitted into an equivalent of carbon. So when we say carbon emissions, it's not just carbon, it's a combination of various gases that are being released into the atmosphere.
Right, sir.
these gases go and trapped in go and get trapped in the air, right? And because of which they they destroy the natural ecological system of the earth. Right? Now, now we come to the concept of net zero. Now that we have all these gases that are being emitted, we need to find ways to reduce these gases.
Right.
So one way is to, to reduce the emission. The other way is to offset the emissions. So in the sense that you emit, but at the same time you plant a forest that will capture the greenhouse gases or carbon. Right. So so between emission, the difference between the emission and the reduction is a that becomes an equation. And if that equation is equal to 0, then we say that we are net zero. So the amount that you are emitting is equal to the amount that you are either offsetting or you are reducing. So that's the concept of net zero. And it is critical because if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement goals of limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, 1.5 degrees centigrade, then it becomes extremely critical to move towards a net zero system.
Uh, Very rightly said, sir. And in fact, we are seeing lots of environmental changes around us. Probably one of the very major cause of all these things. Sir, you will appreciate that businesses are always driven by growth, profits. They look for economic growth. So, how will they balance the economic growth with environmental sustainability?
Okay. It's again a very interesting question. And this is something which a lot of people have been talking about of late. Particularly the CEO of BlackRock has been talking about it a lot of late. But let's look at this in a very sort of hard way. If you focus on sustainability, net zero, you can benefit in many ways. Number one, you can have a product which is known to be environmentally sustainable, and consumers are now increasingly getting sensitive about what they buy. Yeah, and I'm not talking of just the retail consumers. They're the large consumers. So, for instance, you may be producing textiles in India, but you are selling them in Europe and US, and they are very sensitive about environmental issues. Yeah. So as a supplier, you will have to maintain what they do. Right. So if you want to sell, then you have to be environmentally basing. So one way is, if you link it to business, then your business grows even if you are environmentally sustainable. Then let's look at it on the cost side. Yeah, I'm a finance person, so I'm looking at it in a financial way. Now, if you look at it on the cost side, many of the actions that you would take as a sustainable organization, for instance, if you replace fossil fuel power with say solar power, yeah, or a renewable energy, you're actually reducing cost. If you are reducing emissions within the organization, you're reducing your costs. Now, costs have to be seen from two sides. One is, of course, the financial cost, which you are reducing. The other cost is your social cost, the cost of the externalities that you have. And those costs will also go down if you are a sustainable organization. Right? The third thing that it does is to help you manage regulations. Yeah. So all the regulations that are there, then you don't have a fight with the regulatory authorities because you're anyway meeting the norms. Yeah. The last one, which I would put it as is what we call reduction in stranded assets. So let's see what is a stranded asset. Say you have a fossil fuel based power plant, and suddenly the technology is changing and everyone is moving towards solar. People will say shut down this coal based power plant. Now, if you shut down, the original life of the plant would have been 50 years. After 20 years, you're shutting it down. Yeah. So the asset becomes stranded. Uh, okay. Uh, and it needs it needs financing options, etc. But that I'm not getting into it. But at the same time, the moment the more that you shift, the less chance that you will have stranded assets on your books. Okay? So there are these four key reasons why there is absolutely no difference between what they call shareholder wealth maximization and stakeholder wealth maximization, which is what you were sort of referring to. So I don't think that there is a big difference. You can be environmentally and sustainably good, and you can still make a profit. I don't think there is any dispute about that.
Right, sir. So in fact, in that case, there is a question in my mind, like, how businesses, how can they measure or track the environmental impact as such? Because
Mhm.
every organization has a different impact on the environment. So, any metrics, any ways to know, any ways to measure?
So the measures are pretty well known. The measures are straightforward. I think in terms of your emission of greenhouse gases. Uh, so there are various ways. So uh, of looking at it, right? Your key areas are uh, waste, yeah, which involves includes your emissions. Second is water. The water is an important resource, and lack of water can cause significant problems. Yeah, and we are using up water like anything, right? And third is energy, which I've already sort of referenced. Yeah. So waste, water, and energy are three key areas that you need to focus on. Yeah. So you need to look at your, uh, especially in terms of measurements, you look at wastewater and energy. The second way of looking at it is what they call the scope emissions. Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Scope 1 emissions refer to the emissions within the plant. Scope 2 emissions refer to emissions that are derived emissions, particularly from your usage of energy. The third is what is known as Scope 3, and which is the toughest one to handle because that relates to something which is outside your organization. Yeah, your inbound, your inbound supply chain and your outbound supply chain. So you have to measure emissions of all your suppliers way down to the start of the raw material. Yeah.
Correct.
And then it goes up right up to the emissions up to the consumer level.
Right, right.
So you really need good measurements because unless you don't know your emissions, you don't know your baseline. And unless you know your baseline, how can you measure improvements, or how can you even think about what kind of improvements can really be brought about?
Right, sir. Sir, in the same lines, like when companies they are trying to overcome sustainability or maybe transition phase they are trying to overcome. Uh, is there any resistance from the employees in the company in terms of making changes? Because obviously every change is resisted. So does it happen like this thing getting resisted at the level of workers, maybe at the level of customers?
See, bringing in sustainability is essentially change,
Right,
right?
sir.
So essentially, and as the title of our book also talks about it, it's shift. So you're shifting. Yeah.
Right.
So it's a change. It is a process of change.
Correct.
Any change process uh, is resisted, right? So from people's perspective, there will always be resistance. People don't want to do or learn new ways of doing things. Yeah.
Correct.
So that resistance to change will always be there. Uh, and that's why when I was talking about people in the beginning, I said that you need people to be aware of sustainability and sustainability related issues across the organization.
Correct.
Then you're reducing the chance that there is a resistance because everybody realizes the importance of it. Yeah.
Correct.
And how they can contribute towards the reducing the emissions. Yeah. So
Right.
emissions or being sustainable, yeah, in terms of wastewater, energy, the things that I spoke about. So you really need people who are sensitized, who are trained, who understand sustainability. Uh, That is absolutely essential.
Correct. Sir, there was a reference of something called as green jobs in your initial response.
Mhm.
So, my question would be, what kind of jobs can be considered as green jobs? How they are defined as such.
There is no one definition for green jobs. This is still an evolving area. Yeah.
Correct.
Uh, so as new technologies are coming in, right? So you will have you have EV, you have use of the technology in various areas. I mean, technology is changing,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Then you may have a hydrogen car. You may have this is an area of transportation, right? Then you would have, of course, renewable energy. That whole whole sector there. Uh, so green jobs, a lot of people refer to green jobs as jobs that help in transition from what they call brown to green. Brown refers to the old technology, fossil fuel intense uh, approach to a green approach, right? So all the people who are required to bring about this transition need to operate in a different way, and these jobs are called green jobs. But if you look at it, any job is a green job. So like I said, every individual in the organization has to contribute towards greening the organization. Yeah. So so while you have specific this thing, right? Uh, so you have an electrician who operates, who can fix up your house's power, this thing. You will have an electrician who is now trained in solar, so he can install the solar system and provide wiring to your house. Uh,
Correct. Correct.
Not all jobs require significant retraining. Some of them may know it. So, for example, if you have a solar thing on your rooftop, and this is an example that I give often, the guy who puts up your, say, for example, a dish antenna for your satellite TV, uh, Tata Sky or whoever, is a guy who can very well set up a solar panel on the rooftop.
Absolutely.
It's just that additional retraining that is required. I mean, the rest of it, his capability is absolutely there, right? But then on the other hand, somebody who has to manage and look at the power plant. So even if it is a solar power plant, there is a room where you have to keep monitoring and checking what is going on. Maybe that's an area where you will require some new learning because there'll be new terminology, there will be new way of doing things.
Correct.
Or, for example, somebody who's into the production of electric vehicles, somebody working in Tesla, for example, would need to know new ways of doing things. Yeah. Yeah. So so again, there are jobs in across the range where you'll need significant retraining or you'll need just a little bit of retraining.
Right. Uh, so in fact, there was. I always feel that green jobs. Is government have any role to play in creating one and getting those people trained as a uniform policy across? Like,
See, the government definitely has a role to play, right? Uh, Organizations are going to require people in large numbers who are trained in green technologies. Yeah. And where will they come from, right? Our ITIs right now don't produce the kind of people who will get green jobs. I think there's a need for the government also to make changes to the education system, find ways in which these guys can be trained. Uh, I, for instance, visited one of the company's training centers, uh, and they were training electricians, right? Now, these electricians, they started training them on installing solar things in houses. Yeah.
correct.
Now, not too much change, but it's required. Yeah. Now, but organizations can only do so much. They see that I will need 200 people, they'll train 200 people. But where will the rest of the people come from? So you need people who are trained, and I think government does have a significant role to play to make sure that a well-trained workforce is available uh, for the future.
Correct. That's true. That's true. Sir, one more thing which very prominently comes when we talk of we talk about something called as environmental, social, and governance norms. So, what are the components of these things? Like maybe some light you can throw on this.
So I'll just do a quick this thing: uh, environmental, social, and governance.
Governance.
Uh, now, governance is the most easy one. So I'll just explain governance first. Governance is about ensuring that you do well on both environmental and social front. Yeah. So it's a structure that you need to create that helps an organization uh, achieve its goals on environmental and social side. Okay. Now, what is environment? Now, environmental things are anything that relates to the environment, anything that will help improve the environment. Yeah. So, for example, I want to reduce my carbon footprint. It comes under environment. Yeah. Uh, if I'm a shipping company and I want to reduce pollution in the sea, that's part of environment. Yeah. Seas are actually overlooked. They constitute 80% of the Earth's surface, but nobody thinks of the sea. Yeah. There is waste that is dumped in the sea. Then there is ships, because they ply, they use oil. So when oil is burnt, the discharge is put into the sea, right? And then the waste from the ship also goes there, and then you have tourists who go on sailing boats, etc., and dumping things in the sea. So seas are something that we don't really talk about much. We talk about what's happening on the land, but it's both land and sea. Yeah. So land, air, water. Right? Anything that impacts land, air, and water becomes part of environment. The second part is social. Social is extension of what we've always been talking about, something called CSR, corporate social responsibility, which has been towards societies and communities that we live in. So, for example, a company comes and sets up, say, for example, a cement plant in some area. The people who are farming in that area lose their livelihood. Yeah. The cement plant, of course, emits gases and all, which is not good for the health of the people. Yeah. The water sources, around the area are used in the cement company. Right? So all that causes an impact. How do you ensure that the communities, at least around your plant, do well? Yeah. So first you work toward the communities around your plant, and then you extend yourself and try and help societies externally. Right? So a lot of companies do significant amount of work in health and education and things like that. But there are companies that typically take care of things which are necessary to so groundwater recharge and things like that become important.
Correct, sir. Sir, in fact, this is something which is very oftenly spoken, but it's a very nice reply, very something which I could understand in one go when you talked about these kind of key components. Now, when it comes to the social impact, like as you said that like, we gave an example of cement plant. So when companies, when they are doing this kind of social efforts, so how this impact can be measured by the companies about their sustainability efforts?
There are ways to measure it. So that there is something called impact assessment, right? Uh, so so I'm not getting too much into detail because otherwise it gets very technical. But there are methods called social cost benefit analysis. Uh, so you use the methodologies outlined in the social cost benefit analysis to find out what is the cost being incurred. Uh, one part of the cost, like I said, is a financial cost, and then you have a social cost, right? And then you look at the benefits both in financial and social, and then see what is the net impact that is happening to the society as a whole. Yeah. So there are methods that are available that help you in trying to estimate what is the impact of the social work that is being done. Okay? So, for instance, if you look at there could be some simple metrics. Suppose you're working on women's health, right? Uh, now, a maternal mortality rate is one measure that you could use for a social benefit. This thing, it's a very simple, straightforward metric, right? Uh, if you're looking at groundwater availability, then you simply measure the groundwater that is available and that becomes available to the village. So there can be simple measures, there can be more complex measures. So it depends on what kind of a problem that you're trying to address uh, in in assessing the impact, and then you go ahead and do an impact assessment. I'm sorry, I've been extremely brief on this, but then I can go on this.
I'll tell you, sir, why did I ask you this question? Because I always feel, even I stay connected with the people, and at times I discuss with them about their social responsibilities. And at times I have seen that they're done with a very different purpose. Probably it is not with the intention with which this entire thing is being spoken. That's the reason that question suddenly came to my mind, and I asked you, sir. Is
So
there
the
any way
question is
to?
important. The question is important. Maybe I'll just take another minute on this,
Please, sir.
if you don't mind.
Welcome, sir.
See, a lot of work often gets done, and this is a real problem. A lot of social related work is outsourced by companies to NGOs, right?
Sir.
NGOs are often not trained to do measurements.
True.
So a lot of them will tell you, I know what to do. I'll bring about an improvement. But if you ask me uh, to prepare MIS reports, I can't. Yeah. Companies need MIS reports, right? But then, like you rightly pointed out, measurement is important, right? So there is often a need, and I think NGOs are now gradually getting sensitized with the CSR law coming in and impact assessment and all coming in. I think it's becoming very important for them to also measure. So, uh, but yes, there has been resistance on the ground level in providing data and information.
Right, sir. So that question came to my mind altogether very different in context, but I thought I should ask you because you're the right one to reply to this, sir. One more thing which I'm understanding as we are getting deeper into the interaction. Uh, when it comes to the sustainability, we are talking about lots of changes. Somewhere we are encouraging innovations, like reuse and recycling. When we talk about, probably we are thinking in terms of innovations. Maybe the way we are producing the products, the way we are finding the alternative ways of making it, the processes being simplified, or maybe better in terms of maybe environmental friendly assets. Sir, one thing I think at times, like, can company educate customers if for when a product's end of life options? So how
Mhm.
these companies can educate their customers, because customers also become a part of this entire process.
No, that is true. That's absolutely true. Uh, Companies have started doing it. It's not that companies don't do it. Uh, for instance, you will see mobile phone companies put a box in their in their showrooms where you can come and drop your old phone and it will go for recycling, right? Uh, the companies are also sort of educating people uh, by doing various advertising campaigns, right? So you would have seen advertisements about how a particular product is more sustainable, right? So
Right.
some of it is, of course, what they call greenwashing, where you are actually doing good, but you are trying to show that you're doing good. But at the same time, companies are also also putting in effort. So you will see advertisement that say, "Don't waste electricity, don't waste water." Right now, those are small efforts. I'd agree, but those efforts are being made, and customers are gradually getting sensitized, uh, especially with social media becoming so prominent in people's lives. Social media is also educating people, right? And I know some companies who are also using social media to educate the consumers, right? On what to do with their products, how to dispose it off, which is a good way, right? Uh, I think municipal organizations also in some places have now started doing this. I live in Bangalore, and then we have to segregate our waste, right? So
Correct.
we segregate our waste into wet waste, dry waste, biomedical waste, and electronic waste. So there are four categories of waste that we have, and there's a separate place where each of the waste has to be put, and that makes it easy uh, for people to come and take this waste away and deal with them, right? And in fact, our apartment building uh, sort of takes all the wet waste and converts it into manure, and it is sold in the market. So it's a profitable venture as well.
Correct. 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 So in fact, connecting with the same, like, nowadays there are lots of startups and entrepreneurs, and they have an advantage of starting afresh, not carrying any baggage of polluting the environment or something. They're starting afresh altogether with an environment the way you are contributing to this environment. So, what role these startups and entrepreneurs play in driving sustainable innovations? Any cases you came across would you like to cite for us?
Actually, it's huge. If you ask me, it's huge. Uh, See, the problem is a lot of people who are already in organizations have fixed mindsets, and we are
Correct.
used to and we are used to doing things the old way. We don't know how to do things the new way, right?
Yeah.
And these are youngsters who have fresh ideas, uh, who can do things differently, uh, and they obviously contribute towards sustainability. And I think social entrepreneurship is one area that has been growing and growing fairly rapidly. Right?
Correct.
The second part of it is, like we were discussing, innovation is absolutely essential for this field.
Correct.
And innovation is really coming from these people who are starting up. Yeah.
Correct.
So uh, so I can give you one example. I came across an entrepreneur who was trying to eliminate waste by introducing certain insects into the waste, and that would eat up the waste.
Okay.
So the waste will get eliminated. Unlike the landfill that you have, all the kachra uh, of our uh, uh, of our housing, etc., it goes and sits in a landfill. And if you go to neighboring villages, it's absolutely impossible to even stand there.
Correct.
It stinks like crazy.
Most of the cities are facing this problem nowadays, sir.
Absolutely. So if you can find uh, some insects and find a mechanism whereby they can be uh, for breeding and making sure that at large scale you can reduce the waste, then I think it's a very worthwhile thing, right? So people are there who are thinking about new ways of doing things, looking at technologies, right? So, for instance, people are looking at battery technologies. Yeah, EVs use batteries, but EVs batteries often uh, have an efficiency ratios which vary anywhere between 50% to 90%. Yeah. Now, how can you make sure that EV batteries consistently uh, have good efficiency ratios? So these are areas where people are working, and I think a great deal of work is being done uh, by these people. I think a lot of these new ventures will show up uh, as really big companies in the future.
Correct. I don't know, sir, how do you take this particular question? Like, what is the role our culture plays in driving sustainability?
Our culture, see, if you look at it, our culture has been a very sustainable culture. Right?
Correct.
So the way I say it, a shirt that I wear today becomes a mop tomorrow. Right? Uh, Once it gets even more shredded, then it's probably used to plug something that is leaking or something. So we don't really waste anything, or at least we haven't. At least my generation hasn't. I see the newer generation being much more being oriented toward throwing things, but I think that there is still an element culturally in people not to waste. Right? As children, we are told uh, not to waste any food on the plate. We had to make sure that our plates were clean, right?
Absolutely.
It's a sustainable culture. You're not wasting anything. You're not actually sending anything to the landfill, right?
Correct.
And any food that was left over was given to the cow outside,
Absolutely.
and it got, so there was nothing that was that was really left. So culturally, I think and I'm not saying just India. If you look at the entire South Asia,
Correct.
yeah, Southeast Asia has exactly the same culture, right?
Correct.
Highly sustainable culture. The problem really comes from the West. I mean, to my mind, people can beat me up for that, but I think internally we have been absolutely sustainable. I mean, we are changing. The society is changing. We are aping the West a lot more,
Correct.
and that is causing some problems. But I think we are still pretty good.
Right. Right. Sir, in fact, there are a lot of talks about the collaboration across industries and sectors when it comes to the sustainable practices are concerned. My only question is, when there is a fierce competition among the companies, industries, and on one hand they are competing, and on the other hand they are collaborating. Do they coexist actually?
Okay. That is a very interesting question. Again, there is something called co-optation, right? Uh, which is a combination of cooperation and competition, right?
Correct.
And that is precisely what is needed in the industry, right? See, you can't sort of keep inventing the wheel all the time. If one company in the industry has done something and has been successful, all others can benefit from it. So unless you collaborate, right, you can't do it. Also, there are things that impact across the industry, right? So if you're looking at your value chain and you're saying, are my suppliers sustainable? And the same suppliers supply to all the companies in the industry. And because they supply to all the companies in the industry, it's in the interest of all the companies in the in the industry that they become sustainable. Okay. So only when you collaborate, even though you may be competing in the market, you collaborate so that everybody benefits from this. So, so there's no loser as such. I mean, everybody is a winner if you collaborate.
Right, sir. Sir, as we are coming to the closure of things, I have a few more questions which I'll just ask two of those questions which I thought to ask you. One is definitely related to, what advice would you like to give to the business leaders, those who want to start net zero journey, but they do not know how to begin?
Okay. I think the most important thing for a business leader is to see how I can integrate my sustainability goals or sustainability ideas in my strategy. Yeah. Not just strategy, I would say even put it in your vision and mission statement. Yeah. Because unless you have it there, uh, everybody else in the organization doesn't see that you are trying to do. You're trying to be sustainable. You're trying to bring about a change. Right. So once you do that, and then make it a part of your strategy, right? Now, once it becomes part of the strategy, it needs to get integrated into the business model that you have. Right? From the business model, it will become part of the operational. So it goes down, and everybody else in the operations of the company try to figure out how we can achieve the overall corporate strategy. Okay. So initially, you may look at some low-hanging fruits and try and achieve some success so that everybody is energized and everybody says, this can be done. If you try to achieve something tough, it doesn't happen, everybody is demoralized. So you need your morals to be up, and hence you should start working with the low-hanging fruit, get the low-hanging fruit out of the way, show some success. And this is a change management thing. So the quarter's 8 steps of change management are equally applicable here. Yeah. So you start with creating a sense of urgency by showing, look, this is a terrible situation that we are in. We need to come out of it. Our strategy now says that this is a change that we want to bring about, and then get the low-hanging fruit in. Make sure that you succeed in that, and once you succeed in that, there's a momentum that is built, and then it's a question of trying to ensure that the momentum is not broken.
Correct, correct. Because I feel that there are many those who have pure intentions but may not know the way forward, and probably this advice would definitely help many of the viewers, those who are thinking in these lines, and those who read you further.
Yeah, and also, if I just take one more minute,
please, sir.
There is a typical problem that the MSMEs face, right? MSMEs face two critical shortages. Uh, One is a shortage of technology, and the other is a shortage of funds. So it's the large organizations who have to help them with both technology and funds. So somebody who's a owner of an MSME will find the journey far tougher than what a large organization can do. Right? And he looks to the large organizations for support. Uh, I think the issue of MSME is not often talked about, but it's a very important issue.
Correct. Coming back to the book, this is my last question to you. Shift decisions for a net zero world. That's something is the title of the book. If I ask you, what is the main message you want readers to take away from this particular book?
The main message is straightforward. We have to get to a net zero world. Yeah.
Sure.
And you have to make decisions today that will bring about a net zero world, and which will help the future generations to live in the kind of environment that they deserve to live in. Yeah. That's the main message of the book. The shift refers to that we have to shift our mindset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have to stop operating in the old framework, and we have to look at a new framework in which environment and sustainability are a critical element of your business.
Correct. Thanks so much, sir, because it was wonderful interacting with you. The message is so clear, so straightforward.